Hi, John. Hey, Jaguars. This is Miss Schooler with our very first online read aloud of a chapter book. And I hope you are going to enjoy it. It's called So Be It by Sarah Weeks. And the reason I got the idea to read this book, because this is actually an older book that was published in 2004, is because just last week I read this book called Soof, which is by the same author, and it's actually a companion book to this one. And while you don't have to have read this book to read this one and understand it and enjoy it, and that's why it's called a companion and not a sequel, I just figured we would get more of the background a little bit if you have read this book first. And I know some of you have read it, but maybe not everyone. And even the people who have read it, maybe they'll want to hear it again. Now, this book is published by Scholastic Publishing Company, and we want to thank them very much for granting permission for me to read this aloud on YouTube. In this book, one of the important elements is a big jar of jelly beans, and I just happen to have one over here, right here, this big jar of jelly beans. And maybe you can try, as we're reading this, try and guess how many jelly beans are in that jar. Now I'll be reading just a couple chapters each episode. Today I'm going to read chapters 1 through 3, just because chapter 1 is very, very short, but usually I'll just read maybe 1 or 2 chapters. But today it'll be 3 chapters. Move this over a little bit. There we go. And one thing you notice about the title, although it's maybe backwards, is that it's So Be It, but it's not spelled the way we usually see So Be It, which is usually B-E. So that's kind of interesting about this title. So we'll have to see, why is it called So Be It? This is an interesting title. And I always like to read the dedications when I'm reading a book, because I just like to see who is the author, who's important to this author enough that they wanted to dedicate this book. And this one's dedicated to David, who's taught me so much about both knowing and not knowing. With love, S.W. So I guess that's Sarah Weeks. And this book was published in 2004. So Be It. Chapter 1, Heidi. If truth was a crayon and it was up to me to put a wrapper around it and name its color, I know just what I would call it. Dinosaur skin. I used to think, without really thinking about it, that I knew what color that was. But that was a long time ago, before I knew what I now know about both dinosaur skin and the truth. The fact is, you can't tell squat about the color of an animal just from looking at its bones, so nobody knows for sure what color dinosaurs really were. For years, I looked at pictures of them, trusting that whoever was in the charge of coloring them in was doing it based on scientific fact. But the truth is, they were only guessing. I realized that one afternoon, sitting in the front seat of Sheriff Roy Franklin's squad car, the fall before I turned 13. Another thing I found out right around the same time is that not knowing something doesn't mean you're stupid. All it means is that there's still room left to wonder. For instance, about dinosaurs. Were they the same color as the sky the morning I set off for liberty? Or were they maybe the same shade of brown as the dust my shoes kicked up on the driveway at Hilltop Home? I'd be lying if I said that given a choice I wouldn't rather know than not know. But there are just some things you can just know for no good reason other than you do. And then there are other things that no matter how badly you want to know them, you just can't. The truth is, whether you know something or not doesn't change what was. If dinosaurs were blue, they were blue. If they were brown, they were brown, whether anybody ever knows it for a fact or not. And that's the end of chapter 1. I told you it was short. But we've already gotten some kind of clue, something about a police car and a home. So we'll have to see.